Hello, everyone, and welcome to our monthly webinar. My name is Justin Cooper. I'm a hard money lender, full-time real estate investor, coach, and consultant. Each month, we bring in some of our friends in the industry to share their expertise. This may be through a presentation, like when we talk about self-directed IRAs, title insurance, or we may simply interview our expert friends and dive deep into how they got started, where their investing has taken them, and what they see coming both for themselves and for the industry. I want to say thank you to everyone who made it to tonight's event. We know you're giving up some of your time, so Jason, myself, and Travis will do everything we can to bring you the value that you're hoping for. Now, this webinar is brought to you by Pine Financial Group. Pine Financial is Colorado and Minnesota's premier hard money lender. Pine focuses on the needs of Colorado and Minnesota real estate investors, and we're investors ourselves, and we know what it takes to get deals closed. Everyone at Pine Financial Group is dedicated to the success of its clients. We only experience success when our clients are succeeding, so we have a habit of telling you when a deal should or should not be done. And isn't that what you want from a professional in the industry, especially someone that you trust as an advisor? You will benefit from our honesty and integrity when you choose to work with us. Now, tonight's webinar brings in friend and investor Jason Wojo. Jason is a PhD scientist and national level bodybuilder, a full-time real estate investor and entrepreneur, and now is also coach, senior speaker, and CEO of Lifeonaire. Jason's life and business experiences are vast, varied, and unusual. Wojo started his journey as a student in Lifeonaire in 2009 and has been all in ever since, having personally experienced the tremendous impact of the principles in his own life. He now gets to live his passion by sharing the incredible life-changing messages on stages, in interviews, and in conversations all over the country. He's been blessed with a beautiful wife, 2 daughters, a wiener dog named Rusty, and lives in North Carolina. For fun, he lifts things up and puts them down, plays electric guitar in the worship band at his church, and spends time with his family. So Jason, I gave everyone maybe more than just a high-level overview of who you are and what you do, but dive in a little bit deeper. Tell us more about who you are, how you got going here, and then we'll dive into the interview.
Let's do that, man. And before I do that, I want everyone listening to this right now or watching, I want to thank you and Travis for having me on this. And, you know, we haven't had a long history together, but I've had a lot of communication with you guys over the past year or so. And dude, you guys are top-notch people. And I think anybody listening would really do themselves a favor to reach out to you guys and get to know you as well, in whatever capacity that looks like. And seriously. And so with that being said, yeah. So like, you know, listen, I'm a regular guy who has had some very interesting experiences. I started off the 9 to 5 like many other people. Decided it wasn't for me. Like many other people listening, got into real estate full time. That was 2011. Made the full switch to real estate. And what I found is I was working more than I had when I had a job, and so I migrated into this thing called Lifeonaire. I was a student. As a student in Lifeonaire under the tutelage of Steve Cook, the founder, and there's a lot of people who know who Steve Cook is, but he's kind of pulled himself back from that guru status as of late to focus on some other things, and so I found Lifeonaire is all about like taking the conventional business model of, and whether we're talking about business, real estate, investing, it doesn't matter, taking that conventional wisdom of how to do real estate and kind of turn it upside down and saying, hey, you know, you can have all the things that real estate promises, yet, by the way, which very few attain because of they're working themselves to death and working their fingers to the bone. You can have all that stuff and still have an awesome life. And so, like so I now actually I speak for Lifeonaire, I coach for Lifeonaire, I'm the CEO of Lifeonaire, and this has become kind of like my mission, where I get to help people redesign their businesses. I get to help people examine parts of their lives that perhaps aren't looking the way they want them to look, help them integrate these. I want to help people create a business and a life that are complementary to each other, not in conflict with each other, and just help people really live a life of like true success. You know, the time to enjoy it, as well as the money. You know, because we all know people that have all the money in the world. We have no time. That rots. That stinks. And people who have no time, people have time and no money, well, that's not fun either. Like that significantly limits your options. And so like that's what we're all about, is helping people create that life in the business they love, man. And that's kind of like that's what I'm really focused on and passionate about.
I love it, man. I love it. It's so I've seen Steve Cook talk, and that's how I got introduced to Life and Air. I've read the book that he wrote. So I've been following it for quite a while as well. And also just love the idea of what it kind of preaches, right? Kind of living life on your terms. And really, I think that's why so many of us have gotten into real estate and want to be real estate investors, is to live life on our terms and to have that freedom that, real estate investing has, that we've been promised through real estate investing. And Life and I really, I think, gives a clear direction, as to how to find that freedom. And so I love it. It's something I've been working towards. Travis, you still on the line? Can you hear us?
Oh yeah, I'm here.
And so what about you? I know you've been following Life and Air for a while as well. You're actually how I got introduced to Jason. So how about you? What are your quick thoughts on Life and Air before we really start diving into what we're chatting about today?
Yeah, I mean, really interesting. Of course, when I first heard it, I was skeptical, like just about anything I hear, right? I don't know, sort of internal or skeptic, but I was really interested by the message, and in the past I've listened to like Dave Ramsey and I've enjoyed that message and thought, that's good for other people, but that's not what's right for me, right? And that's how most people approach it, buying rental properties and things. But reading the book, the Life and Air book, was definitely a changing point for me and how I started to shift how I thought. And the one line that really stood out to me in the book, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it today, is when they're sitting down at the coffee table, and the gentleman who kind of lives his life by Life and Air versus the one who isn't, and the one who isn't, he says, yeah, I own my house. And the guy who's living by the principle says, oh, well, if you stop making payments, I think you'll find out who owns your house, right? Because the bank will own it. And it was just really interesting. That kind of changed my perspective of, even if you have properties with a lot of equity in them, at the end of the day, you're not the one who's actually in control. And so as we've kind of gone through these strange times over the last few months here, almost 3 months, and had my kids at home for almost 90 days and, just kind of grinding through, not only do you start thinking about these things, but also starts to make you think a little bit about, maybe it wouldn't be so bad going for those 4 walks every day, having the freedom to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, go ahead, Jason.
I was just gonna say, Travis, I gotta tell you, man, confession right now, when I got into Life and Air, it wasn't the life stuff that appealed to me. Like I knew Steve was a successful real estate investor. I knew he had made many people millionaires, and I'm like, show me the money. Like, I'll worry about the life stuff later. And so I started from that perspective. I think most people do. Like that's kind of, I think most people do. Not everyone, but like I think it's just the natural allure of that.
Yeah, I agree. I think so many people feel that money equals freedom. And so they focus on the money up front. That's where the direction they're going to go. And someday that'll lead to the freedom. And so that kind of leads into my first question, actually. So what we're talking about is why so few people have become successful in real estate. And so with that topic, though, I think one of the most important things to start off with is defining success. And so, Jason, to you, and maybe to you and to Life and Air, how do you define success?
Man, for me, it's living the life that you want to live. Like, it's as simple as that, really. Like, being able to make any choice you want and having the flexibility, the options, and the freedom to do that. And so for now, and by the way, it's going to be different for everyone. Like, some person may define success is spending 10 hours a day with their family. Another person may say, hey, I want to work out and run marathons and train 5 hours a day, and then do this other stuff. And so everyone's very, very different. But to me, success is having the freedom to do literally whatever you want, whenever you want, as much as you want to do it. And yeah, listen, I will never say money is not important at all. That is not the message of Life and Air. Life and Air is not saying, you have to like live like a monk or live on ramen noodles or craft mac and cheese, in the pursuit of this like mystical monk-like existence. But there's so much more to it. And so that's what I think really success is, because listen, I believe anybody can make all the money they want if they work enough, but what are you going to sacrifice along that path? What are you going to give up? And at the end of it, is it really what you want? And some people have to I understand some people have to get to that end to realize it's not what they want. Some people, I was kind of a stubborn, kind of hard-headed, slow learner, and so I had to crash and burn to make sure to realize that it wasn't everything. But I think that's what really success is like when you can make that rule and definition for yourself.
Awesome. I love it. And so as we're going tonight, Travis, of course, is on the line. He's with Pine Financial Group. Travis, jump in at any time with any other thoughts or comments and stuff. But for everybody listening and watching the webinar, jump into that question section. Feel free and drop any questions you have in there. And I'll definitely be monitoring that the whole time here and jumping in with those types of questions. So as I wait for anybody else to jump in.
Well, yeah, as you wait, man, there's one other thing I wanted to say here is, like you mentioned, few people are successful in real estate. Let's forget about for a moment, the defining success as having all these choices, and let's just look at success financially. The romance and the allure of real estate is very different than the reality. And so someone who's not in real estate, or someone who's a brand new, they're a newbie, or they're a seminar junkie or a RIA fan, they don't know what it's really like, because they have illusions of HGTV and flip this house, and they think it's romanticized. And so even if we're discussing finances solely as a measure of success, very few people set their businesses up correctly to experience that. Like how many people, I'm sure you guys know this, like if you're a flipper, say for instance, like it's like, you're struggling, you're trying to find a deal, so you put all this effort into finding the deal, you find the deal, and then all of a sudden you're focused on that deal, and then you rehab it, you sell it, and by the way, while you're doing all this, you're stressed out, you're trying to like manage this project, you're living on debt, and then you get the huge paycheck, and now you're taking that huge paycheck to pay off all the debt that you just accumulated during the project, and then like it's this up and down cycle of income, but people don't make wealth. They're not getting wealthy off of it because they haven't set their business up correctly. And by the way you set your business up correctly is by having your life set up first. So when you know what your life is going to look like, then you can set up your business. And so, even if we're just looking at finances, like, there's a very big difference between somebody being truly successful as an investor financially versus just someone who's an investor and calls themselves a real estate person, a real estate investor.
So that's interesting. Let's dive a little bit into that. So like when they're trying to set up their business and get started as a real estate investor, what should they really be focusing on? What are those steps that they should be taking to make sure that they're not, living paycheck to paycheck, flip to flip? What should they be doing up front?
So a couple like really practical tactics to do this. Number one, you got it. Well, let's assume first that you've already set up what your life is going to look like, which is huge, because you're not gonna structure your business correctly unless you know what your life is going to look like. Meaning, let's say you create and you guys have talked about this. I saw at your event where you talked about, hey, your I forget what you called it, like your perfect day or your ideal day or something along those lines, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So let's say in your ideal day you have 4 hours of work that you can do a day before you're going to impede or spill over into other parts of your life. Okay, so if you have 4 hours in your business, you need to know, what am I going to do within that 4 hours to make sure that every single moment that I'm working is spent for the highest ROI investment of your time, of your energy, of your talents. And so this will dictate, number one, what you do. Whether you're talking about managing vendors, whether you're talking about transporting materials from Home Depot, whether you're talking about like doing the books, like all of that is one part of it. The other huge part is, and this is something that people, super practical solution here, set yourself up on a payroll. Like, do not live off a flip. Like, so when you have money, you have to look at this as a business. And so you're going to have money that should go into your marketing account. That should absolutely be put aside no matter what. You should pay yourself first. So you have a salary, take a modest salary of, I don't know, maybe it's only $3,000 a year. Sorry, $3,000 a year. No, maybe it's only $3,000 a month. But that's going to keep you from experiencing those ups and downs. Maybe it's more, maybe it's, but take a salary, pay yourself a salary. By the way, speaking of salaries, with all of this stuff with COVID going on right now, these contractors who have done 1099s are having a harder time getting those PPP loans versus people that have set themselves up on a salary, regardless of the business. So that's I've had a lot of people complain to me about that recently. And so those are just two simple things. Like, when you have your life set up, you'll know what you can work on and how much you can work in your business, and then setting yourself up to normalize your cash flow. And which, by the way, this kind of does lead a little bit into, and we can talk about later if we have time, these 4 stages of financial prosperity that I think everybody needs to work, whether you're an investor or just someone listening, and you have a 9 to 5.
Yeah, I love that you went to the flip model here, Jason. A lot of our clients are flippers, but I remember talking with Michael Jake years ago, who you know well, down in Colorado Springs, and I remember asking him, why don't you flip? Because he was buying so many rental properties at the time, and he made a comment to me something along the lines of, never met anybody who's retired from flipping. And that just really stuck with me, right? Because he's buying cash flowing assets, building this portfolio, creating the life that he wants. And if anybody knows him or sees him on Facebook, he does exactly what he wants when he wants, right? I mean, he's done well. And that piece, though, about the flipping is, when sometimes we see it in our own business where you're ratcheting up that debt, you get the deal done, you cash out, and it's almost as if you hit the lotto or something. People go spend that rather than setting it aside and living on a small bit and using that money to reinvest. It's such a typical pattern. And just as you noted earlier, HGTV or whatever kind of shows that, right? Bought the house for X, put Y into it, got Z, now what? And fancy cars and this and that. And in this business, in the flip business, you never know when your next deal's coming. So until you've got a handful of years behind you and a steady deal flow, well, you got to be careful with that money and what you do with it.
You're so that man. That's so true. And not to say that flipping is a bad thing, but it's not really a business, because if this thing depends on you, and I was just talking with a buddy. He owns an auto tinting and commercial window tinting company, and he wants to buy a location. We're talking about helping with that, and I'm like, dude, what happens if he's like the main guy, he has a staff, but he's like the main guy. Something happens to you, what are you going to do? Like, how does it, and for many flippers, that's the same problem versus, Mike has portfolio income, and somebody else, those can still function without Mike. And so he's built in some insulation there. And so not to say that people can't set up their businesses correctly, but there's pitfalls to look out for.
Yeah, with you 100% on that.
And so, Travis, I wanted to jump in and kind of circle back to the other point that Jason was making about having designed your perfect day and building your schedule. I know when we kind of all at Pine Financial started working at home for a little bit, your schedule got turned completely upside down. But you're still getting everything done that you need to do, but you're also spending a lot more time with the family, like you were saying, going on 4 walks a day. And so how has your life changed? And maybe how much of that stuff do you want to carry forward or not carry forward now that we're kind of getting back out of the house and back to the office and those types of things? I'm wondering how you've designed your day and still get everything done.
Yeah, I mean, it was really rough on me for the first couple of weeks. Just as you noted, man, I'm the type, I like to go to the office. I like to be in front of my 2 screens, have my big chair, and have my dedicated workspace. And being at home with 3 young kids, 7 months, 2.5, and just turned 5, they didn't even have schoolwork to do, right? They need to be entertained and fed 24 hours a day. And it was challenging. And at the same time, my wife's business, she owns 2 salon suite businesses, and when the salons were shut down, she was dealing with a lot of stuff there. So we're like kind of bidding for work time. I think I usually get the kids breakfast. So, my work hour was 8 to 9, and then she had 9 to 10, and then I had 10 to 11. And it was just so hectic. But, it took some time to get into the groove. And when I finally conceded to stop working at the kitchen counter and come down to the basement, things got a little bit better. And then as her salons reopened, things got a little bit better. As you know, Justin, and you too, Jason, real estate was still going. So Pine Financial, we still had deals to do, a lot of late nights staring at the computer. And I realized I didn't want to be doing that forever. But from this point forward, the kids just went back to daycare yesterday, 2 of the 3. And so now I'm looking at continuing to work from home a couple days a week, not only for mentally, but also to help my wife out with our youngest while she still has a business to run. And so I'm going to carry that forward. But as Jason was talking about earlier, when you only have 4 hours a day or whatever it might be to work, you have to be so intentional with that time. When you're in the office, it's pretty easy for you and I to get carried away about what was on the news or, a football game or this or that. And it's not that it's not welcomed, but it's not productive. You know what I mean? We'd much rather be on the ski slopes or something. And when built correctly, you have discipline is freedom, right? And there's certainly a lot that goes with that. And how about you, Coop? You're a little bit different than me. You're totally happy right there with those headphones on. What happened with you, and how are you handling it?
I'll tell you what, man. This is similarly. It was kind of rough getting, establishing the schedule and how we're going to do it. But now that we're in it, I've got an extra bedroom in our house that we when we moved in a couple of years ago, we established it as a home office. And so I was a little nervous about how, with me working at home and my wife also working at home because she was an essential business and her business was still up and running, how would we balance it? How would we trade the time, because one of our kids was in school, and so how would we handle teaching the school? So it took a little bit of time, but we kind of found our rhythm. We've had a nanny coming and working with us really from the beginning. We didn't do the daycare stuff. We had a nanny that's been with us for several years, and so thankfully the nanny could still come over, and we made sure everybody was going to be safe and healthy and distance and not interact too much. But we got into the rhythm of my wife and I would trade off Monday and then Tuesday and then Wednesday and Thursday for the schoolwork, and the nanny would come at like 10 or 11 so we could focus on the school in the morning. Hopefully we got everything done, and then the kids would kind of hang out with the nanny, and Jackie and I could get into work. But over the weeks, I was sitting on a hard hard kitchen table chair for a while there, and that was just killing me and my back, and it was uncomfortable. I wasn't productive, and so it took me some time to figure out, what do I need? How can I be more productive? How can I just be more focused? When I'm physically not healthy because I'm sitting on this hard chair for hours a day, now I'm physically in pain, and so I'm not focused. I'm up wandering around on phone calls. I have these headphones on that are noise canceling, so the kids can be loud and I don't hear them, and I can focus on the work. So it took some time to get into the rhythm of how I can work and focus and get things done and be productive. And now, like you were saying, Travis, about us chit-chatting in the office, although I miss that tremendously, I also don't miss it because I can be more focused and be more intentional. And as much as I love shooting the breeze with you, Travis, I could spend that hour hanging out with my kids, at lunchtime or something like that. And I could do that because I am here at home. So for me, it's been an opportunity, trying to find the silver lining in everything that we've been doing is, and I want to ask you a little bit more about this, Jason, is because we were forced into this different lifestyle. And so we kind of had to design how our lives will work and how we can be the most productive and get the highest ROI out of the time we have working. And we've had weeks to figure this out. I think, Travis, it sounds like his worked through it. I've kind of worked through it. And I think a lot of us, whether they were intentional about it, like I think Travis and I to a certain extent were, or not, have found those ways to do it. But, Jason, if maybe somebody hasn't been as intentional about these things, not just how can I get things done and be productive, but the bigger reason, Travis now has the ability to be back in the office potentially 5 days a week, but he's choosing to only be there, less than 5 because he spent that time figuring out his lifestyle. So if somebody hasn't listened to the Lifeonaire message, hasn't seen you speak about this, how can someone approach that to take hopefully what we've experienced over the past several weeks and months and help designing this perfect day, this perfect week schedule to get to that point?
Well, man, it's an interesting question. And I think that most people, not everyone, has been essentially thrust into this new reality, at least for the last, few months, 2-3 months. And so they've had, first of all, many of these people, think about like the responses you were getting from people early on when all the quarantine stuff hit. People were like, oh, I can't wait to get back to work, whatever. But as they kind of I think it's you know, there's like stages of like coping, like, you know, how like it's like, you know, whatever, I'm angry, and then whatever, and acceptance, right? So as people finally got to a stage where once they let go of that, if they were present, if they were paying attention, they noticed some things that they do really honestly miss, like that they really, really can't wait to get back to. But there's also some things there has to, I'm promising everyone listening right now, there's some things that you also got to experience that maybe you didn't think you would enjoy, that you now enjoy, or things that you now appreciate that you before like kind of went unseen or unnoticed. And so I think all of us have kind of now same even for me, like I work out of the house anyway, so I'm always home, but my wife is now working from home, and we have a 2-year-old. Now just totally luck and coincidence here, of course, my older daughter, who's 19, is out of college because that got shut down. So she's over 3 days a week helping out. And so we do have some help. But I've realized some things about my own life, like that I want to try to change moving forward as well. But I think it comes down, for anybody who has gone through this, I think the first thing is like to really step back, forget about your preconceived notions about getting back to the way things were. Look around you over the past month. What kinds of things have you really enjoyed? What kinds of things have kind of were more exciting or more fun or more fulfilling than you previously would have thought? And you know, like some people are like, you know, even my wife has said, like, you know what, I think I'm going to see if I can work from home a little bit more. I mean, I don't want to work 5 days a week at home. You know, she's like, I'm around you all day. That doesn't make it any better. And, you know, but so she's recognizing this. I think everybody can see this now. Here's going to be the interesting thing. And I'm really curious, what's going to happen when people do start re-entering the job force? I've already seen some reports and studies suggesting, and polls suggesting, that we may actually have a challenge with people not wanting to go back to work. So I don't know, like, okay, if that's really the case, maybe this is just a test. Like, you know, this is almost like a forced test that everybody found themselves in. And there's parts of your life that you really like and that are working, and there are parts of your life that aren't working. You know, if you have a bad relationship with your spouse, now all of a sudden you guys are around each other 24/7. That's not a good thing, right? And so it has brought to the surface a lot of things. It's been a real crucial, it's been a brutal but an honest test of like how you've set yourself up to this point, and maybe the potential for what things can look like if you want to move them that way forward, or like, you know, some changes you might have to make. So it's really been almost an experiment.
Yeah, absolutely. And so last time I saw you speak and present, you on one of the slides you had a week-long calendar, right? And so I'm wondering if you can expand on kind of like that slide and how you approach that in designing like what you want to do each week. Because as we're coming back out of this and we're figuring these things out, what works, what doesn't work, you know, am I okay being next to my wife all day, or do I need some space, or, you know, those types of things. You know, how can we approach that? If we were to start just a brand new calendar right in front of us, how should we start filling that thing in? Because most folks, you know, as they're figuring out, well, should I go back to work? And so Monday through Friday, you know, 9 to 5 is just work. But now there might be that opportunity to adjust that. And so if somebody's maybe approaching that, how might they do that?
So the calendar you're talking about was basically this Lifeonaire calendar when we walk people through. So one of the first things I mentioned earlier was like, hey, let's assume you know what you want your life to look like, and then we can talk about business. Along the lines of what your life is going to look like, part of that is honestly like how you're going to spend your time. That's a big part of it. And what are the things you're going to do? And so one of the exercises we have people do is put down in a calendar format a typical week, not in a way that is like, hey, you're going to write down exactly 8:30 a.m. you're going to do this, it's not a rigid calendar. But what we're trying to do is figure out, and this is a great example of, and we can tie it back into the quarantine in a moment. What we do is put down on that calendar all the things you said you want to do first. Then we figure out how many hours you have left for work. Like, so let's say in that calendar, like in mine, for instance, I work out 4 or 5 days a week with weights. I'll do cardio 4 or 5 mornings. I like walks as well, so I do that. Well, and actually I'm doing a lot more family time now. But you know, I'm putting down all the things on there that I want to do, and then once that's done, now we can design our business. And so for everyone that's just coming out of this quarantine thing, what I would do is look at everything you've just experienced over the last month, and what are the parts you want to keep? What are the parts you want to continue moving forward with as you kind of reintegrate? And I'm not saying all this stuff is necessarily, you know, you can't just go, it's not like a cold turkey kind of approach that really works most often. It's one thing at a time. Now, for some people, it could be cold turkey because, you know, you may all of a sudden, your employer may all of a sudden say, hey, come back to work, like, and we're going to start, you know, full fledged. And I think we're going to send some people into like, you know, relapse here, but like, you know, at least pick a few of those things, some of the important things, and keep those on your calendar. Keep them there, and then as you kind of free yourself up, you pursue one thing, and then another thing, and then another thing, and then eventually you're living that full calendar in real life. It's not just some theoretical, you know, fun little dreamy exercise where you get to imagine what life would be like. You're living it, and so it's a really cool thing. But to your point, like it's having that calendar is actually very valuable, and keeping that in front of you, because it kind of keeps these decisions at the forefront of your mind, and makes you more aware of those things when you're in that situation.
Yeah, real quick, Jason, as you kind of talk about that calendar and what you know somebody might be able to keep on there as they kind of re-enter here. You know, some people don't have that flexibility. Maybe they do have the 9 to 5. Maybe they over this past couple months worked from home, they found that they do like to take that lunch with the family at walk. Can you maybe give some examples of how somebody would kind of slowly back into said lifestyle, knowing that they might have some barriers to entry?
Yeah, so the first thing I would absolutely suggest, for if you're someone who has enjoyed some of the flexibility of working from home, there's going to be a lot of employers that are going to decide to cut costs in terms of their office space and their on-site workforce. And so you may be in a position to negotiate working from home a couple days to maybe even a few days a week. And so by the way, if that's something you enjoy, right? If it's not, then don't do it. But the first thing I would say is open up that possibility for some remote work. The next thing I would say is like, and Travis, is this somebody you think, is this theoretical person somebody who loves their job or is trying to get out of that job? Like, what does that look like? Because that'll influence my answer as well. Like, because if it's
sure, I suppose anybody who's on this webinar with a full-time job probably doesn't want to be in that job anymore, right? I mean, just because of the aspect of real estate and kind of the background.
Yeah. So I'm a big believer that if you can't make real estate work part-time, you're doing it wrong. This does not have to be a grind. Like we talked about earlier, if you set your business up correctly. Now, and by the way, I also realize there's a learning curve here. Like, let's not sugarcoat this, and this isn't rose-colored glasses. Like, there's going to be some time you're going to have to put in the trenches here. There's going to have to be some education. There's going to have to be some things you're going to do. But my hope would be that if you're somebody, let's say you're on a salary, you produce, don't rob your employer, by the way, to like, listen, I did this, okay? Don't be me. Don't rob your employer and do real estate stuff while you're at work, okay? Do that in your spare time, or do it over lunch, or do whatever. But if you have the ability to work from home, you're on a salary, you produce the desired results for your employer, and you can actually be, and this is, by the way, Travis, you're gonna get me on a rant here, because the hourly wage thing is I have a real challenge with that, because you're not rewarding people that are good at their jobs. Essentially, you're punishing them for being good at their jobs. But let's say you find some extra time because you're delivering the results for your employer, and then you're gonna have to just start that real estate journey. You're gonna have to start reaching out to people like yourselves who know about real estate, who can help people learn about real estate, who can get around other people that are doing it, and you start to kind of see a little bit of the light at the end of the tunnel. But with that, like, quite honestly, I think now is probably one of the best times that I can remember in recent years to do that, because we have the lesson with the working from home, and we have the new expectations for what this looks like. And so everyone might have a little bit more bandwidth than they previously would have, like, a year ago. So it might be a really, really good transition for people.
So go ahead, Travis.
I was just going to say, you know, one of the things, Jason, that kind of caught my attention before we published the last webinar that we marketed with you, and kind of getting into today before we went live, was how you were mentioning how kind of your Lifeonaire friends, or your lifeies, I think you call them.
Yeah, lifeies.
Just how the life has been a little different, and you know, maybe with a little less stress and that type of stuff. Would you mind maybe touching on that a little bit, and just kind of maybe, I don't know that we have time to go through all 4 stages tonight, and we could certainly link back to the webinar that I think you probably still have live, the recorded version that covers that. But just to try to give an idea, like when you say things are going better for them, like what does that mean? You know, I mean, what does it, you know, does that just mean they're just on an island somewhere rich, or does that mean that they've made some moves and they're making things happen?
Man, well, so it's multidimensional, and let me just go into tell you what I mean by that. And actually, it struck me when you were talking about, when we were just talking a moment ago about how life has been disrupted and like kind of working from home, and like we're trying to find our groove. If you've designed your business that you only need to work 4 hours a day and you can get the results you want, well, guess what? If your family's home and you have all these distractions, it's a little bit easier to get that stuff done versus if you needed 8 or 10 hours a day. And so as you guys were talking about this just a moment ago, I'm like, wow, here's another example I didn't even think of, like that when you have set yourself up in your calendar in a way that you only need a minimal numbers, you know, of hours, it makes it easier too. But in particular, the way I had meant this in the past was that the first thing is, like, Lifeonaire is, we have a vision for what life is going to look like. And so when you have that vision, it doesn't matter if there's a global upheaval or a personal challenge that affects you. Your path is kind of, your destination is still kind of the same. Like it might be a little bit, it might be affected a little bit, but like you're not that affected mentally, because like the end game for you probably most likely hasn't changed that much. And so there's a sense of peace that no matter what happens, no matter what life throws at you, you kind of know that, like, you know, I'm still on this path. Like I'm not really affected. Like, so for instance, for me, a big part of things that are important to me is my family, and I'm spending more time with my family than ever. A part of me that is important is helping people. Well, guess what? I'm helping more people than ever now, because people need help. And so like it's just kind of amplified what I've already put in place. Now, that's just one side of it. A couple of the other sides of this that's really important is in these 4 stages of financial prosperity. One of the things we talked about, and this is, I know this sounds cliche, but like winning with money at the base level means making more than you spend. It's kind of making sure that you're meeting your needs through ideally passive income that is debt free. And so we encourage people to have assets that produce income that is not encumbered by debt. And we always get a lot of feedback and resistance to this at first, because people are so accustomed to using debt, which there's nothing wrong with debt from any kind of major perspective. But what debt does in some cases is causes more stress in some people. Like some people can be leveraged 99%, 100% and not lose an ounce of sleep. And that's some people. And other people, you know, can't owe anybody anything without losing sleep. Now, that's the mental side of it. But what's happened is we're seeing people right now, for instance, that have leveraged rental portfolios, that have leveraged Airbnbs, that have significantly leveraged stuff, and the income dried up, and they've been affected significantly. And so now these people are struggling and scrambling to make ends meet. Now, some of these people have been really smart and have accumulated a large degree of savings, which is something else we encourage people to do, and so they can weather the storm. And so so when I said Lifeonaires are kind of doing better than others, it's because the vision hasn't changed. It's because they don't, many Lifeonaires are debt free or very minimal debt, so there's no one to pay when things, and by the way, debt works great in some cases, and then we have something like this happen, and it's a little bit more stressful. We have people that have significant amount of savings. We have people that are around other people that kind of are feeding them the right kinds of information. You know, here's another thing: if you're feeling like you're alone on an island and you're checking out like the news, like you're not in a good headspace. But Lifeonaire is kind of one of the things that has that has brought them together is this shared sense of like, hey, I'm going to help you because that's who I am, but also it comes back to me, not in any kind of like I expect it way, but just a natural flow. And so Lifeonaires have kind of been helping each other through this, and have given each other ideas and have pivoted their businesses. You know, for instance, we have an Airbnb person who got the idea from somebody else to market their Airbnbs to hospital workers because of all the people are needing more staff, and so they did that. And so while other Airbnbs were struggling with rental or reservations, this person was fine. And so there's all kinds of examples of this. And so it's just kind of being part of that community, you know, being set financially. Not and by the way, like this is something like I know not everybody's in a situation, and I was just talking with Justin earlier about this. Is like I don't want to be insensitive to people who are really struggling, but like in some cases, like I think what this is doing is showing the weaknesses in your financial plan, your financial picture. You haven't designed things strategically to weather these kinds of storms. Which, listen, it's just feedback. You're not a bad person. You didn't fail. You just maybe overlooked a couple things and could have done things a little differently. And so those are some of the reasons why I'm seeing Lifeonaires kind of like they're like, okay, yeah, my business is down a little bit or this is affected, but like I'm not sweating it. I'm not freaking out or the sky's not falling for me. And I'll tell you, man, that if this would have hit 10 years ago for me, I don't know where I'd be, man. I had about 650 grand in debt. You guys, I don't know if you remember, I had almost 90 grand of credit card debt, by the way, which was all smart until it wasn't, right? And so I don't know what I would do, man. Lord knows. And so I'm very grateful, and I'm not even gonna take any credit for it. It's just a matter of being around the right people.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, right? I mean, just because, you know, the three of us are sitting here today having these conversations about how we've been, you know, working and it's a struggle to make sure we can still stay busy and work, you know, through this, where so many people aren't, you know, it's been a long time coming for us to be able to get to this point. So I think that's a great, I really appreciate you sharing that little insight, especially into yourself. And so as we all here are investors or want to be investors, and you had mentioned earlier going to like a real estate investor event, in doing that, in coming out to these webinars, as you know, maybe just the downtime and learning and stuff, you know, we're presented with lots of different opportunities, whether there's opportunities to learn, to sign up with different gurus, you know, to go down different paths, or just, you know, I get 5 wholesale deals a day. So I'm wondering some guidance as we're presenting with all these opportunities. What's like a question we can ask ourselves to help us determine what the right opportunities are, be it in real estate or anything else?
Yeah, that's a great question, especially for somebody who's brand new, right? Like they don't know what they don't know. They don't know, hey, am I going to enjoy storage? Am I going to enjoy wholesale? Am I going to enjoy like mobile homes? Like I don't know. Like, you know, what is this? I think a few of the questions someone really has to ask themselves is, number one, I think the biggest one is going to be like, will I enjoy this? And the reason is because if you enjoy it, and by the way, you're probably not going to know if you enjoy it until you try it. In some cases, in some ways, you might know right off the bat, like, you know, I don't want tenants. You know, okay, well, what other passive investment opportunities are there? Are you going to look into storage? Or are you going to look at whatever? Am I going to enjoy it? Because even if you're spending 4 hours a day working, you still don't want to spend 4 hours a day doing something you don't like. I don't care what kind of money you make. So am I going to enjoy it? Could I see myself doing this in regards to either my current skill set or would I enjoy developing the skill set necessary to do this? And so being honest with yourself about your giftings. And I'm not saying you have to be gifted in this to do it, but like, would you enjoy to develop that gift in yourself? I was quite frankly told I had a really good friend say, dude, I'm no offense, but like, I can't believe you actually speak. Like, you are awful. Like, you are terrible. Like this, when we were in school together. And I'm like, wow, thank you, I think. Like, so, but are you willing to develop it? And would you enjoy that? And the other thing is, of course, how does this fit into my life? does this fit into my life? Like, so for instance, if you're someone who says, hey, I want to run a 1,000 property portfolio, and also, work 1 hour a week, and spend the rest of my time with my family, like in Prague. Well, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but there may be a little bit of a conflict there that may be a little bit more of a challenge than had you pick some other business venture or way to do that. And so I think you gotta really make sure this fits into what you're going to do long term. Now I know that's probably, some of these things are valuable, but I know I was also in that position when I was young, in the game of real estate. Like, I did explore a few different things. Quite frankly, dude, I have courses on my bookshelf that I've never even opened. I'm that guy, okay? And so I wasted some money on this stuff too. And so I would, something else struck me too is, like, talk to people that are doing it and see what they like and what they don't like about it. That's probably, if you're not gonna, I mean, you can't do everything yourself, but to start to whittle it down, talk to people that are actually doing it and really successful, not like on the surface successful, but ask them, like, what does your life look like? How much are you working? What's your calendar like? Find out these things from other people, and see if this is something that appeals to you.
Yeah, so I really like what you're saying there, and I think what folks need to really digest is that we have to get to know who we are, right? What do I want to spend my time doing? What skills do I have, and can I exploit? Can I expand on? What skills do I think I want to have? What directions can I take this life, learning and growing and working to grow, that I think I'm going to enjoy? I mean, we have to spend time getting to know who we are, in order to really have all this come together, because I mean, it's going to be a journey, right? We don't know exactly how it's going to go, but I mean, depending on how old you are, you have a pretty good idea. But we have to spend time and actually get to know ourselves.
Dude, that's so true. And I think, it's funny we're having this discussion right now because we just recorded a podcast today with a woman who were just talking about, like, how success and perseverance kind of lead you along this path. And, like, now along that path, there's so many other things that fall away by the wayside. And so I think one of the common things here, though, too, is also, don't try all of them at once. Like, you really got to kind of go and give something an honest shot, like maybe one thing at the very, very most two, but I'd honestly try to focus on one sole individual thing and give it a real shot and see if you enjoy it. And don't be afraid of, if you don't like it, if it's not turning your crank, then just don't be afraid to you didn't fail, you just found out what you didn't like. Don't be afraid to course correct, and try something else.
Yeah, I like that. Don't look at it as a failure, but it's an evolution, right? And we're figuring these things out. What direction do I like? Well, I started going this way because I thought I would like it. Turns out I don't. So okay, now I got to pivot and go another way. We're going to be figuring this out as we move forward. So I like that a lot.
Well, man, I love what you just said there about evolution, because think of it this way. Like, I never thought of it this way till right now, but like in evolution, you had something pop up new and it either helped or it didn't. Now, that was involuntary, but in our case, we have a conscious evolutionary decision to make. Like, hey, this is helping me. This is getting me to where I want to go. This thing is serving a function in my life, or it's not. And if it's not, like, let go of it. Get rid of it.
So it's interesting, because as we start something new, we try something new. New things sometimes are hard. Usually are hard, especially if they're worth doing. And so if we're doing something that's hard, at least for me, I get wrapped up in a lot of this negative self-talk. You're never going to figure this out. This is taking too long. This isn't going to be productive. Whatever it is, right? I can't do this. I'm not good enough. Whatever it is. And so the negative self-talk, and that's something I've always struggled with. But for other people out there, how would you advise them to combat the negative self-talk that they have?
So this is a whole nother topic, but I'll tell you, there's a few things that, so number one, there's a couple different ways that you can approach this. Number one is you could sometimes you'll look at somebody else and be like, okay, well, if they can do it, I can do it. And when, I don't know if you've ever seen this, where, like, you have built somebody up so much in your mind, then all of a sudden you talk to them and you're like, okay, they're not as sharp as I thought they were. If they're really doing this, like, there's no reason I can't. I got to stop making excuses for myself. But let's assume that's not available to you, and it's all up to you. I think so. Here's where I feel like this recently struck me, is like, in school, there's two things that we are taught that really damage us as people, as entrepreneurs in particular. One is that failure is bad. Like, you get an F on that test, it means you suck, you're stupid, like, and you internalize it, and you start, and you're gonna get in trouble, and you're gonna get grounded, and so we learn to avoid failure. And so I think part of this is truly realizing that a failure is nothing more than feedback. It's just giving you a result for something that you didn't necessarily want, but guess what? That you got part of your answer in that failure, because now you know that's something not to try. And without going down all the cliche lines of like what failure means, it really is something that if you cannot internalize it and you just realize, like, okay, this wasn't what I wanted, let me try something else. And really, and stick with it. This is something that I think that will reframe failure for you. The other thing that I think that school has done a disservice on, as far as entrepreneurs, is, you take your test by yourself in school. Everything is on your own. And the only group projects you ever did, of course, you get around other people, and they're worse than you, and they're slackers, and you're carrying, and it's just a mess, right? It's horrible. So the way real life works is the most successful people work in teams. You have whether it's a staff, whether you have colleagues, whether you're in a mastermind of people, whether it's your buddies, and you guys keep each other accountable. And so as you are struggling with these thoughts of like, hey, I can't do this, I'm not good, I'm not smart, I'm not whatever, I'm not enough this, that, educated, whatever. Get around other people that have done it, and so that and borrow their faith. Like, let them pour into you, and let them kind of help you along, like, draft their success.
I love it. I love it. So Travis, you've been quiet for a little bit, and our time is starting to wind down. Any thoughts, questions, comments from Travis?
Yeah, I mean, all good stuff. I just real quick before we kind of get into the last two questions here, Jason, we've talked about Lifeonaire quite a bit, and we haven't, maybe if somebody hasn't been exposed to it before, I mean, if somebody wanted to read the book, where would they find that? Or if they're a little bit more interested in seeing, the webinars or the podcast, I mean, how do people find you? How do people find the message? What would somebody take as the next step if something we said here today, they thought, man, that's something I'd like to learn more about?
Yeah, man. So the book is oftentimes people's first exposure to Lifeonaire, and you can just go to Amazon and get that. It's just called Lifeonaire. We actually launched a podcast within the last couple months, and it's I'll tell you, if it's important to living a great life or having a great business, we're going to cover it, because like I said earlier, we need both of them. And so that podcast, you can find it on, I mean, basically anywhere you find podcasts. It's like a real podcast, guys. Like, you can actually go to and find it on your phone. Like, this is like legit. And so, what's
the podcast called? What's it called?
The Lifeonaire. Yeah, it's called the Lifeonaire Show. The Lifeonaire Show. Yeah. And then the last place I'd say people can get involved and learn more is we have a free app. And you can go to the App Store or Google Play and download. It's called Lifeonaire. Just download Lifeonaire app, and we have a fast start kit for anybody who joins the app. And it has a bunch of vision worksheets. It has training on the 4 stages. It has all kinds of worksheets and stuff that people can start to whittle through this for themselves. Before, even if they've never attended one of our events or one of our webinars, like, you can get a lot of this stuff for free. Like, just by being in the app and listening to the podcast. And then, when you're ready, you can start, working with us if you'd like to attend an event or whatever.
Awesome. I love the idea.
I
love the idea of the app and the worksheets. I've been through some of that stuff. And as we're talking about getting to know who we are and where we want to go, you've done all of that work in saying, here's the questions you should be asking yourself. Here's the next one. And here's one after that, to be diving deeper into who we are and what we want. So really, if folks just go there and get this stuff for free, whether it's through lifeonaire.com, right, on the website or the app, you take them on this guided journey, right? And all they have to do is answer the question. And then, well, what do I do next? Well, you go to the next question and answer that. Right. And it helps you put all this together. And through answering those questions, you're getting to know yourself and what you want and what you're good at and all these things. So if earlier you weren't really sure what we're talking about, that's, go get Jason's free stuff. He's already, done all this work for you.
Man, I'll tell you, and like, yeah, so check out, we have a ton of free stuff in the app. Check it out. There's also a lot of incredible conversations going on in the app. So you could ask a question and and I'm in there. I'll chime in, like Steve Cook, the founder of Lifeonaire, is in there, so you can get feedback. And then if you're going through this stuff and you realize like, hey, I need some help, cool, let us know. We'll help. We'll figure out how we can help you. But one thing I do want, as you're talking, man, I always have this filter in the back of my mind of like, sometimes like, well, yeah, that's great, but like, as meaning somebody might be thinking this. Everybody thinks they know what they want in life. I'll tell you, man, it's truly the minority of people that actually know what they want it to look like. Everybody just thinks, when you ask somebody what they want their life to look like, it's like, I want the 2-story colonial house with the SUVs, fully funded 401ks, and that's your balance sheet, man. I want to know what your life is gonna look like. And so all these things that you mentioned are designed to help you really figure that out for yourself, not what your parents wanted for you, or society, or culture, or your neighbor.
Yeah, I love it, man. So somebody had a question. Looks like they're looking for the app. Could it be called Lifeonaire Promotions LLC? Is that who put it together, or is that?
It should. So the app. So there's 2 places you can go. If you go to lifeonaire.com, you will find it on the homepage to download the app. If you go to the Apple Store, or I think it's the Apple Store, and if you just type in Lifeonaire, it should bring it up. It's a let me see what it looks like. Yeah, so no, it's just Lifeonaire. It's just Lifeonaire. Yeah, and it says and the icon, man, this is weird. It looks like some other people are making Lifeonaire apps too. That's super bizarre. But yeah, it's just Lifeonaire. It says business under it. It has a little round circle thumbnail with a little guy with his hands up, and or I guess it could be a girl. I'm not really sure. A person with their hands up, and that's the app. But also, that reminds me, if you go to lifeonaire.com,
to the side a little bit, is that the what it looks like behind
you?
Yeah.
See it right there. That's the Lifeonaire person. There's also a desktop version. So if you want, like, I'm a desktop guy. I don't get on the app, quite honestly, that much on my phone. And you can get the desktop version right from lifeonaire.com too.
Awesome. Well, I think maybe I got one last question here. We'll see if anybody else has anything else for Travis, but if you could share one question that folks should ask themselves that will determine what they want in life, what they want their life to look like, so what kind of legacy they can leave, what would that question be?
Man, I think I would have somebody ask themselves, if I don't change what I'm doing right now, where will I be in 10 years? If I continue along the exact path I'm on, how does that look? Whether we're talking about your health, whether it's your relationships, whether it's your spiritual life, whether it's your business, your finances, like, if I continue upon the path I'm on right now, am I happy with where I am in 10 years? Because that is a very powerful question. That oftentimes will motivate people enough that there has to be a change. And sometimes it's a confirmation that they're on the right path. That's great. It's fantastic. But if not, like, you have time.
Perfect. I love it. Travis, any other thoughts?
Oh man, I just love that answer. Just the idea of thinking, just as you said, in 10 years, such a good mark. And I think that if you're not happy with where you are, it's so obvious. And if you're pretty comfortable with what you got going on, you're like, okay, 10 years, that's fine. I was helping somebody with a rental portfolio review in January. And I said, here, this is what I think you should do. You should sell these, maybe do a 1031, trying to help this gal to increase her cash flow, reduce debt, just make life overall better. And she actually jumped onto the last Lifeonaire webinar, and I think she went through it. She might be working with you now. But what was really interesting is that when the pandemic came down, she sent me a message and said, hey, I know that you talked about the plan, we laid it all out, but should I still be following this? And I said, well, let's look at the examples. I laid out the examples. By doing A, you would reduce debt, reduce stress. By doing B, you would reduce debt, increase cash flow, whatever. And just like just as you said there, Jason, if you have a plan, like, and you know what you want to do, 10 years just doesn't even seem that far out, because all you have to do is just keep doing the plan, right? You just stick to it. And, my comment to her is that sometimes we might hit pause, right? The entire economy just hit pause. Like, we don't know what's going to happen. So maybe you just hold on for just a second, but you know what your goal is. You don't all of a sudden pivot and shift to buying more real estate because it's discounted when your entire goal was to increase cash flow, reduce stress, and reduce debt, right? And so as long as you stick to the plan, and Justin's challenged me with my plan a lot over the years, but it's just about when you have the right plan, nothing else matters. You just stick to it and you do it. But finding said plan is so difficult. And without being, as you alluded to multiple times, Jason, around the right people with the right mindset, it is nearly impossible to set that plan because you only have the perspective of your own. You know, you don't have other eyes to look at these plans and say, well, what about this? Or what about this? Maybe you tweak this. And it just helps you to kind of hone it in even better. So just really like that question and like the answer.
And so along those lines, you know, with the worksheets that Jason has and Lifeonaire provides, and spending the time thinking about all this, write it down, whether it be journaling, whether you come up with like a vision statement, a vision board, whatever it is, write it down, put pencil to paper. Travis, I am speaking directly to you because I've told you this over and over. Write down the plan, because then it's concrete, right? Then it's not a matter of, well, maybe I should or maybe I shouldn't, right? It's right there. You can go back to a physical document and say, this is taking me to where I need to go. And of course, it can be a living document. It can change, but isn't it a lot harder to change an actual document than it is to just change the thoughts in our head? And so once we have some good thoughts, get it down on paper, you know, wherever it is, make that vision board, whatever it is, but actually put pencil to paper, so to say, and get it out of your head. And it's going to be a lot harder to deviate from that, but a lot easier to stick to.
Love it, man. That's totally right.
Awesome. Well, Jason, any last thoughts before we wrap up?
No, man, I just want to encourage your people that listen, like, it doesn't matter where you are starting from, like, this stuff is absolutely achievable for everybody. And I promise everyone in this line, no matter what your life looks like right now, you can live the life you want if you just do what these guys are talking about, what we're talking about here. Make that plan, be honest with yourself, and start with persistent, you know, direction, and get around the right people. All of this stuff is super, super valuable and can result in what you're looking to achieve.
I love it. Jason, thank you so much for spending the evening with us. Really appreciate the time and the thoughts, the insights. If you do want to follow Jason or stay connected with him, obviously, you know, hit him up on the app, go to lifeonaire.com. Jason is very easy to get a hold of and follow, and certainly all the things for free that he's offering are really incredible. And of course, if you are investing in hard money or you want to get started and you need some debt up front, Pine Financial is a hard money lender, and we would love to chat with you, get you pre-approved, help you finance your first deal or your next deal. Of course, I'm do some coaching and consulting and help folks get into rentals so that they can, you know, ultimately achieve the success that we talked about at the very beginning. So if any of the three of us can help you in any way, please feel free and reach out. We'd love to talk to you, but thank you so much for joining us on the webinar tonight, and we will catch you next month on the Pine Financial webinar. Thanks, everyone.